My name is Jerome McQueen, and I'm from D.C., the country. I must have been 6 years old, and I'm playing on the dirt road that sits in front of my trailer house. Pardon me, manufactured home. So this particular day, the county comes in to pave my road. Now, the first thing that they do, the guy jumps on the backhoe and he starts digging a ditch halfway in my yard. I look at him, and my 6-year-old self let him have it. Yo, man, what you doing? That's where I play. He pointed to another guy and he said, kid, that's the way the engineer drew it up. So in my mind, I'm like, what's an engineer? But I noticed during that week, the engineer was the guy who was directing the whole project. He was telling this guy to go over there, this guy to do that. He was always looking at these big white papers. And so by the end of the week, my little world had been transformed. You see, I was playing on a dirt road where the dust can be so thick you can taste it in your mouth. But now I had a nice, smooth road that I can play on. And it was at that moment that I said, I want to be an engineer. Because engineer transform lives. But the guy on the backhoe was like, kid, I've never seen a black engineer, a Hispanic engineer, or even a woman engineer. And I felt fear. How many of us have allowed fear to cast doubt in our life? So the first barrier I came on trying to be an engineer, I'm from a small rural town with limited resources. And that's just a fancy word of saying our hometown was poor. You see, even in the 1990s, we were still using a school building that was built in the 1890s. It sat so close to the railroad track that when the train came through, it felt like it was shaking off its foundation, rendering it impossible to learn. You see, Dillon County, South Carolina is still the only county in all of these United States that does not have an elected school board, meaning that the leadership is not held accountable to the will of the people. I did not learn the high-level mathematics that would properly prepare me for the rigors of an engineering curriculum. So I started developing fear. So trying to deal with that fear, my mama said, let's go find you a role model. But you remember the guy on the backhoe? Sadly, he was correct. In my little corner of rural America, there were no engineers that looked like me. So I started developing this fear of, is it even possible for me to be in the STEM world, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics? Now, things have gotten better since those days. However, there's still only, black engineers still only account for 5% of all the engineers in the STEM workforce. And so, as I tried to deal with that, all these fears kept coming. But I tell you what, because I had a God on high and a mama that would cut me low, I graduated from high school with honors, got accepted to an engineering program where after my first semester, I had a solid 1.4 grade point average. Yes, I said it. A 1.4 grade point average. Now, how many of y'all feel comfortable on a bridge designed by a 1.4 GPA engineer? Look, I don't have time to hear your answer. But I had engineering professors at South Carolina State University that said, hey, you're better than this, and you better get your act together, although they didn't say act. But they wrapped their arms around me and ushered me to the finish line. Now, through prayer and perseverance, I pulled that 1.4 GPA up to graduate with honors. I was awarded a NASA graduate fellowship by the late, great Dr. Fred Humphreys at Florida A&M University. In that fellowship, I had a research project at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Cleveland, Ohio. But as I sat on the plane to fly to Cleveland, those fears started coming back. Am I good enough? Did I come from the right resources? Am I going to make too many mistakes? Those fears were so overwhelming in my head that I couldn't hear the roar of the engines upon takeoff. You see, I was going to NASA. I was going to study with the brightest engineers in the world. And where did I come from? The country. But when I got to NASA, they had what I call an angel on earth in the form of an assigned mentor. And she said, yes, she said that, Jerome, I want you to become a special engineer. And within about 3 or 4 weeks under her mentorship, I started developing confidence in myself. And even though mentors are so important, data says that only 37% of professionals have a mentor. But because I had that infrastructure in place, I was able to turn my fears into advantages. But how many of our young people coming from underrepresented populations and from rural communities have that to lean on? That's what we had to work on. And so because of my parents, my professors, my mentors, my study partners, even my employer, McQueen, I stand today a licensed professional environmental engineer, proving that what we're doing in STEM is working. We're on the right track. We just need more tracks. Now, why am I so passionate about diversity in STEM? I'm glad you asked. At age 46, I was diagnosed with stage 2 colon cancer. The way I found out was that my body had released so much blood that by the time my brother-in-law got me to the hospital, I didn't register a blood pressure. Eventually, I had a colon resection where a portion of my colon was taken out. I spent 27 days in the hospital because every other issue that I had reared its ugly head. My blood pressure went up, my blood sugar went up, and my kidneys shut down. I had to be dialyzed twice before I was able to be released. But I was released, made a comeback. 4 years later, we saw that the cancer had put 2 lesions on my liver. Categorically, I'm a stage 4 cancer patient. I went through months of chemotherapy where the chemotherapy robbed me of my personality. I withdrew. The chemotherapy drew down my lesions probably about 45%. Then I needed a liver resection where 20% of my liver was taken out. The first lesion was on the surface right next to my inflamed gallbladder that was taken out. But the second one was deep down in the tissue of my liver where I had to have special biomedical engineering equipment to go core down in my liver and take that out. Afterwards, I went through more chemotherapy to try to prevent it from happening again. However, my MRI from 2 weeks ago said my battle still continues. And there were 2 things that was always on my mind. The first one was, if there were more underrepresented populations, people at my medical table, could they have recommended that I have a colonoscopy at age 40 instead of regular age 50? Could I have prevented what I've been through and what I'm still about to continue to go through? The second thing that always over my mind was this poem of adversity, perseverance, and uplifting. The poem was written by William Ernest Henley. And William Ernest Henley was diagnosed with tuberculosis at the age of 12. He had to have one of his legs amputated and go through a series of operations to save the other. He penned several poems during his recovery, but his most famous poem, I want to dedicate it to all those young people who want to study STEM, especially from the underrepresented populations and from rural communities. When you face that unequal equation, when you face those unspoken fears of STEM. And he says, out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I think whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced, nor cried aloud. Under the blessing of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years find, as shall find you unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. You are the master of your fate. You are the captain of your soul. Thank you so very much.